Have you ever left in the middle of a date? If so, why? Dude came to meet for a beer completely stoned out of his mind and incapable of any conversation. He made really random observations about the bar and then said that he only had harvested enough for one beer. I paid and bailed. LOL harvested. Not a date, but I left dinner with my brother and his crazy girlfriend of the month. This one wouldn't stop telling us about how she had recently conquered a dream shark that was giving her nightmares. It was a metaphor for her life or something. I told them my cat was sick after she showed us a picture she drew of the shark. I really did try, but after 30 minutes being lectured on a dream shark, I lost it. This was 2001. Met a girl cycling in the mornings and every morning we seemed to have the same schedule. We chat while we rode. She was funny and had a killer body, so I asked her out. We meet up for lunch, talking for the first time not on our bikes. Not 5 minutes into it 9/11 comes up. She said the following: God didn't protect us because of the gays in NY. Islam should be illegal in the US. She saw no problem killing Muslims and or gays. Non-Christians shouldn't be allowed to vote. Bonus: she almost didn't come to the date because there are so many blacks in the city. Note, this was not a discussion. It really came out almost bullet pointed. I'm just sitting there going aha. She goes from one topic to another. I straight up just said, "You are truly a horrible person," and went on my merry way. Stuck her with the bill. If my grandmother dated or cycled, I would think that you were talking about her. A couple times. The most memorable was when the guy put his hand on my thigh and whispered, "Just so you know for later, I'm HIV positive." I think that under the right circumstances, that's okay. Maybe not as creepily as that, but it's good to be open about STDs if something were to actually happen. Blind date. My friend's boyfriend's roommate. My friend told me he'd seen me when we had stopped by their house. I didn't remember seeing him, but she insisted that he was a real sweetie, and this was exactly what I needed. Just gotten divorced, had 2 kids, recently home from Iraq. Meet him at the restaurant, and he's the most attractive Middle Eastern man I have ever seen in my life. We started talking about his work, medical resident. I was a paramedic, so that was fun for me, and at first it seemed to be going really well. Then, he asked about me. Obviously, Iraq came up. I'd only been home for 6 months, so it couldn't be avoided. Turns out he had really strong feelings about the war. Funny thing was, for the most part, I agreed with him. Trouble was, he jumped straight to the "you are a murdering racist. I've got a temper, and I had PTSD, so my fuse was a touch shorter than usual. Thus ended my first date of divorced life. I ended up married to the next guy I went out with, so that's the only story I've got. But seriously, if you are fixing up a veteran on a blind date, at least clue in the other person about it. Especially if that person has a valid reason for having very strong feelings about it. Like, you know, they are from the region that was invaded on questionable pretexts. This one makes me sad. I think both of you had very understandable reactions. Not polite, perhaps, but understandable. Not to stretch a metaphor too far, but it really knocks home the idea of how the horror of war separates people who might otherwise love one another in another time and place. When I was in college, a girl I knew who had an interest in me asked me to go with her to a sorority pledge dinner event. She needed a date and didn't want to go alone, so I felt I was doing her a favor. But I didn't know anybody, so would stay relatively close to my date in the event she wanted to introduce me or simply to act like a date, staying somewhat close. After dinner she went from one person to the next and was awkward because she wouldn't say anything and just walk off, so I would follow. At one point, with about 3 of her future sorority members around, she turned and said, "Are you just going to follow me all night like a puppy dog?" I looked at her and simply said no and walked away. I walked straight to the car and left. Don't know how she got home and didn't care. She went to where I worked the next day crying and told me how sorry and rude she was and wanted to go out again. I was nice to her, but going out on a second date was not going to happen. Rude response, but at least she apologized. I think the cordial but no second date stance was a good spot for that interaction. He kept glaring at the bartender who was smiling at me while pouring my glass of wine. When I asked the bartender for a recommendation, the guy was not happy that the dude and I were talking. I went into the bathroom and had my friend call me in 5 minutes to pretend to be my roommate locked out of our apartment. Keep in mind that this was the first time we've met face to face and first date. I love the possessive ones. Met a woman on OkCupid, and after chatting back and forth for a few weeks we decide to meet for coffee at a local Starbucks. When she shows up she's much heavier and older than her pictures, and looking like she's coming off a 2-weekend bender. I decide to play it out, to see what happens. Conversation was pretty dull till she started talking about her job and how much she hates it, mainly because her bosses don't pay her a lot because, I quote, the Jews. I immediately excuse myself to the bathroom and call a friend for the classic call in 5 minutes with an emergency. No response. Time to man mode it. I go back to the table, state I have to leave, grab my coat, say it was wonderful to meet her, and bolt. Thankfully never heard from her again. I was 19 and accepted a date with an older guy. I thought he was probably 27 or so, but it turns out he's 37. The club where we met danced he got my number was sort of dark. We go to dinner, and he starts reminiscing about going parking and making out back in the day and would I like to go for a drive later? Something I ate gave me a stomachache. Sadly, I had to go home early, in a taxi. She was from a nuclear family with lots of money. In itself, not a bad thing. However, she proceeded to go on a rant about trashy people from divorced, remarried and single parent families, and how those people would never amount to anything, that sort of thing. She also mentioned how she could tell I was from a traditional family with wholesome values, not some loser raised by a single mother or influenced by a runaway, deadbeat father, her words, because I was clearly raised right. At this point, I get up from the table, track down the waitstaff, and ask for separate checks, as she proceeds to call me an butthole for not paying for her meal and acts confused about why. I tell her not to contact me again, but that I'll be sure to pass on to my single mother that people are noticing how well she raised me. She probably told everyone in her social circle how your rudeness further verifies her theories on single parents while leaving out all the crap she said to you. Great thread, sad I'm a little late with mine. So, first date, we were talking about TV shows we like, and she mentioned My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, which I had also seen and liked. Then she said, I wish American men could be real men like gypsy men are. Okay, I don't think the traveler lifestyle is the healthiest on the planet. Lowest life expectancy in Europe, rampant illiteracy, domestic abuse, all the bad stuff. Plus the expectation to be married by 18 at the latest, so she was clearly unmarriable to a traveler even if she'd not been the wrong ethnicity for them. My family does a bunch of outreach in the traveler community, helping them go to school, find housing if they want to settle, that kind of thing. So I am more familiar with this lifestyle than someone who watched one TV show one time. So I tell her some of this. Then she says that I'm not a real man because I don't want to be a domineering patriarch, and that it's probably all because I was raised by a single mother and therefore know nothing about what a man is supposed to be like. End of date. He walked like 10 featuring ahead of me. I asked him to wait for me as I'm 5 featuring 2 and he was a 6-footer. He told me that I should just freaking move faster. I just stopped and headed back to the car. He didn't even notice for a while. Date never happened. Halfway through this date I had in high school, I was extremely gassy and trying so hard to keep my composure. If I didn't let one out I would be miserable the entire date. Well, I definitely should have held it in as the gas was far better than the outcome. I basically sharted on my way to the bathroom, stopped, turned around, put money on the table and left in a hurry with my cheeks clenched and a very baffled date behind me. Let's just say we never went out again. Thank you for amusing us with your suffering. He told me he didn't have a job and had no intention to get one. He was looking for someone to support him, in short. I got up and left. Yes, first and last date. He picked me up at my place. Before we drove off he told me he was apartment sitting cat sitting for a friend couple of blocks away from my place and he just needed to check on the cat before heading out for dinner. I said sure, not a problem. So we go to this apartment. I stand in the doorway while he does his thing. feeding the cat and whatnot. I just ask whose apartment is this, just making small talk. His response, it's my ex-girlfriend's of 7 years. She's totally okay if we frick on her bed. At that point I just turn, open the door and walk out of the apartment without saying a word. Never heard from him again. I met a girl in a dating site. We went on a first meet type date at a Starbucks, which went pretty well. At the end she mentioned that she had a bus to catch home and I offered to drive her. She accepted and I drove her home. But when we got close she asked that I pull over a block away. She said she still lived with her ex due to a lease and not having the money to get her own place yet. Anyway, we kiss and she gets out. A few days go by and I get a call from her and we go on a second date. This time to a bar. We flirt and play pool and are having a great time. After dancing a while we take a sit down and chat for a bit. It's at this point she makes a comment about how tough the job market is. This was in late 2009 and that her friend really had it bad after Craigslist banned prostitution. At this point I'm like, oh yeah, that would suck to have to do that for a living, and the date went south from there. She starts accusing me of flirting with another girl at the bar and then drops this one, "You're trying to make that girl jealous. You like her, don't you?" I'm confused at this point and say that no, I'm having a nice date and have no interest in this other girl. She then says, "Look, if you're going to treat me like a W then pay me like one." I was so shocked. I started to deny that was what was going on and she keeps demanding payment. I finally caught on that this was in fact a Craigslist W using dating sites to ply her trade. I said, "Oh frick you," and left her there without a ride home. I didn't realize I was on a date. My co-worker mentioned we should grab dinner while finishing up a project we were working on, which seemed like a good idea because it was after work and I was hungry. While I was reading over his draft, he asked me, "How serious are things with you and your fiancé?" Well, we've set a date and I have a dress fitting coming up, so pretty freaking serious. Whoa, that's nervy right there. Yes, I have. I didn't know it when I agreed to be set up with her, but she and her boyfriend had broken up about 6 weeks before we went out, on Valentine's Day, no less. She was an emotional, hysterical wreck from the start. She was fluctuating between periods of rage and abject sobbing without much time in between. I've never felt so bad for anyone as I did for her during the hour or so we were together. She was clearly not ready to be on a date, understatement of the year, maybe. So after 40 long minutes, I politely told her that the date was over and that I would be taking her home. Believe it or not, she's actually a friend of mine now. I wouldn't say we're terribly close, but we text fairly often. She did also text me a few days later to apologize and thank me for handling it as well as I did. Not technically a date, was solo at the bar on Easter night and started chatting with a solo lady next to me. She was cute and conversation starts out decent enough with some light flirting sprinkled in. Gradually get hints that she's the self-absorbed type who somehow always finds a way to steer the conversation back to herself, but think maybe she's just nervous and give her the benefit of the doubt. We are a few drinks deep and had moved seats to another part of the bar to sit closer. Religion comes up again. She forgot we already talked about this. She's Christian with good morals. I'm non-religious but perhaps spiritual, and believe everyone is entitled to their own beliefs as long as they don't infringe on others. She seemed surprised but okay with this the first time. This second time, however, stunned, wide-eyed, B-mood engaged. "You don't believe in God. On Easter, you say you don't believe in God, you piece of crap. You piece of crap." She then motions to pour her glass of water on my head, and I calmly somehow defuse that. She continues, "I can't believe I wasted my time with you." She has attracted the attention of the bartender and patrons. He doesn't believe in God. On Easter, I'm somehow able to covertly ask the bartender, "Check please." Separated. Swiftly pay. Calmly say something like, "I enjoyed talking to you, but you are being rude, and I'm leaving. Have a good night." And I calmly walked out. As Ms. Good Morals sat stunned that I left her. Yep. Got set up with a guy. Total striped shirt bro. I knew he wasn't my type but figured what the frick. Let's try something new. He took me out to the standard date restaurant in my city, which is boring but the food is good. Then all he could talk about is how amazing his alma mater, Ohio State, is and how much Michigan sucks. Miraculously, at some point, He asked about my family. I gave him a quick rundown and mentioned my female cousin was married with a couple kids. Asked what her husband did and I said her wife stayed at home with their children. And he responded with, "Oh, she's a les? Was she sexually abused as a kid? I mean, that gay crap isn't normal, so that sucks, you have to deal with it." Instead of arguing and questioning him, I just got my butt up and left. I didn't even say a word. The look on his face was incredulous. To this day, I can't hear or see anything about Ohio State University without thinking about that piece of crap. The Ohio State University, striped shirt bro. My sister was on a first date and he let her pick the movie. She picked a really artsy movie. Halfway through he got up and left her in the theater. She ended up finishing the movie since she wanted to see it. He was waiting for her outside the theater. Said he couldn't sit through any more of the movie, but he liked her and asked if they could continue the date and go for drinks. He is now my brother-in-law. Yup, mid-20s, met the guy. Mutual friends said he was nice and that I should go out with him after dinner, which was awkward. No connecting. He said he wanted to go to his place and get whatever. I do not recall. So he has a roommate, very creepy guy, around 40, balding, seedy, greasy t-shirt. About the only furniture was a disgusting couch, leaking foam rubber, stained, and a tripod with inversion boots to hang upside down in, which I was invited to use in pretty scary terms. I was not wearing pants, which they pointed out, too. I left in a big hurry and dropped the friends that thought this dude was okay. I definitely have. I tried Tinder dating because I figured why not? It's shallow, but at least you should know in advance whether there will be a physical attraction, right? Oh, I was so wrong. So I show up expecting to see a guy who I bonded with because we both compete in powerlifting and as such are in good physical shape, and he is 23 and I am 20. Nope. He had been using some fairly old pictures because 1. He was fat. 2. He was at least 30 years old. I let it slide and think we can potentially still have a nice time having a drink, and I just won't sign up for a second date. So we sit down and are in the middle of having a beer, having a decent chat I may add, when we start discussing how our luck has been on Tinder so far. I'm nearly done my beer when he says, yeah, I figured to be successful I'd have to lower my standards. That's why I matched with you. I was absolutely floored and had no idea how to respond, so I just excused myself to the bathroom, paid the waitress for my beer and gave her a tip, and left. Well, I'm not sure this counts, because I didn't leave, I just almost did. I thought he was super creepy and super insane on our first date, mainly because he showed me pics of a disembodied boob on his phone that he had biopsied for cancer. He's not a serial killer, just a doctor, and gave me a long, meandering, weird lecture about the importance of doing self-breast exams so as not to end up like said disembodied boob. I texted my BFF immediately after. I have the best story. I went on a date with a guy who showed me a boob on a table, all bloody, and then he lectured me about boobs, but he was all muscle. Why? And I really wanted to see what his arms felt like. And then we had this great conversation over text. So we went on a second date, and he was like, I can't believe you went out with me again. I was just nervous. And you asked about my job, and I wayward vomited. Anyway, I tell that story all the time now. His family thought it was hysterical at Thanksgiving. His mom laughed so hard she cried actual tears. So now we have a really great first date story. And he sends us all, my family and his, the occasional cautionary email. Look at this lung. Don't smoke. All of you. Check out this leg bone. That white part is cancer, and it has replaced the whole bone. Go straight to the doctor when you have pain. At first my brother and sister were like, WTF. Can we opt out of this list serve? But it grew on them and now they find it hilarious. I don't even know, you guys. I find it really endearing now. We're getting married this summer. She kept using the word infer when she obviously meant imply. I know some guys would put up with that kind of thing, but frankly, I can't imagine why. Are you nervous about going on a date with someone as pretty as me? Left the table. Asked her not to follow me. Bonus. I stayed at the restaurant and got drunk at the bar by myself. Actually, this date was pretty awesome now that I type all this out. This could actually be a half decent joke in a self-deprecating kind of way. I'm guessing that wasn't the context though. I was in grade 11 and she was in grade 9. Super cute girl who made me smile and feel alive after a horrible breakup a few weeks earlier. We went to the mall to walk around, have lunch, maybe go shopping, keeping it light for a first date. She was really into her ZOMG random phase, but I thought it was cute because it wasn't the real her, so I put up with it, but it was exhausting. After lunch she must have had this amazing idea of playing hide and seek, so when we walked by the elevator, she ran in at the last second and texted me find me XD. I left. I asked a girl out to the hookah lounge I used to work at once. First thing that bugged me was that she texted non-stop. From the beginning onward. On top of that, she would hog the hose, even when she wasn't smoking it much. My breaking point, though, was when she casually mentioned that she'd done M a few times, and thought it was fun. No freaking thank you, even if you are hot, until the M catches up. Anyways, luckily for me, a friend of mine showed up, and after I ducked to the bathroom to text him, we began Operation Super Third Wheel, and he sat down with us. Took all of the focus on conversation to himself, and eventually I ended up just leaving with him to go to a different lounge. Thank you, Homer, you're my lifesaver, buddy. Met a woman through OkCupid. We traded a few messages, moved to texting and then talked over the phone. She seemed pretty normal. Fast forward to the first actual meetup and it's going well, but something seems a bit off. She's asking me all kinds of questions about income, job, what my rent costs, etc. I dodge most of them by changing the subject or give vague answers. She straight up tells me that she's ovulating and wants me to impregnate her. I mean, under different circumstances, I definitely would have, but I hardly know her. She started talking about how many kids she wanted to have, how I'm so perfect, and so on. This was a small town that I worked in for a year because work transfer and career advancement. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, flagged the server down and paid the bill, said this date is going down like a Russian plane in a snowstorm, and tried sneaking out. She saw me as I was making a fast walk to the door and leaped up from her chair and started running. I was running to my car like one of those scenes in a horror movie, complete with fumbling with the key fob to remotely unlock the car. Hopped in, started up and got out of there. I heard her yelling for me to come back because we were going to have a family and make lots of babies. Blocked her on OkCupid and blocked her number on Google Voice. Thank God for Google Voice. The guy was in Bartolin trying to berate the waitress, constantly complaining about everything from his beer to the font on the menu. I just had a bad feeling about him so I paid my tab and left. Charmer texted me calling me a C afterward. She saw no problem, as she talked about her cats on our first date, in leaning slightly to her left as if to just shift weight off one hip to the other, and let forth a boisterous booty belch in the process. She never acknowledged it and she never skipped a beat in her story about how her cats were using her various plants for the litter box. The table behind her got the full effect of her exhaust as they questioned each other as to who did it. How they didn't hear this sound emanate from women behind them I'll never know. Both the butt trumpeting and the feline fecal Easter egg story did well for my appetite. When I excused myself to the restroom after dinner, she did the same. I walked in the restroom, counted to 20, went and quickly paid my bill, and left. When I got to the car, I called her brother, had him come get her, told him she was ill. When I was 2 miles up the road, she called me. The only thing she said after I said hello was, "It was the fart, wasn't it?" I said yes. She hung up the phone and I've not spoken to her since. Met this guy through a friend. He's got a tattoo of baby footprints on his forearm and I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty. Who is it for?" And he's like, "Joshua, my son." And I didn't know he had a son. But he finished it up with, "Yeah, haha, don't you feel like an idiot now?" I still don't know what I should have felt like an idiot for besides agreeing to a date with him, but I got up and left. I told her I was a programmer for a living and she said, "Well, that's boring." Finished my beer, paid the bill, then went to another brewery to enjoy being alone again. I kind of felt bad for this one, but here it goes. This was many years ago when I was still in high school. I started talking to this girl online. She was a friend of a friend of a friend. This was pre-Facebook and even before most people had a MySpace, so I had no idea what she looked like but agreed to go on a blind date and see a movie. She insisted on seeing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I personally really don't like horror films and slasher flicks are the worst of the worst in my book. I tried to suggest seeing pretty much anything else but she wouldn't do it. I was still in high school so I just said okay. She was a girl after all and I was a desperate high school boy. So I show up for our date. We agreed to meet early so we could talk some and get to know each other before the movie started. She shows up and she brought a friend without mentioning that to me. It was cool since it was a blind date. Can't be too careful after all, but she decided she was also coming to the movies with us and third wheeling it up. The girl is really not my type but I didn't want to be superficial so I figure let's talk and maybe our personalities will mesh. Nope, absolutely nothing in common. After half an hour or so of awkward conversation we decide to go sit in the movies. I'm sitting there and only 5 minutes in I'm miserable. The movie barely started and I already hate everything about it. I start thinking to myself, why am I torturing myself to be polite to a girl who I'm never going to speak to again? Her and her friend are the ones that really wanted to see this, not me, so I decided they can watch it together. I lean in and say I'm not feeling well. Dip out, got the movie theater to give me a refund and went and bought a burrito. The burrito was wonderful and I had way more fun with it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.